Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the 128th episode of Stories of Service, Ordinary People Who Do Extraordinary Work. And I'm the host of Stories of Service, Teresa Carpenter. And today we have another amazing guest. This is a conversation that I have wanted to have for so many months, probably years. Dr. Zakiya Mabery, how are you doing today?
I'm well. How are you, Teresa?
I am doing absolutely fantastic. And we have known each other for quite a number of years. Even before I started a podcast, one of my
Yeah.
inspirations for starting my podcast back in, it's really 3 years next month that I've had this show. And 3 years ago, myself, you, and a few other ladies got together with Dr. Karen Hills Pruden, and we were all co authors on a book called Complicated Alliances. And it was the stories of women who serve or whose husbands have served in the military, and those kind of complicated relationships that we get into when we are serving in the military or we have this very transient lifestyle. So I got to know you. You had your own show at the time, I believe.
I
And
did. I did. I was doing a virtual live stream there, Game Changer Chat, which will be back soon. So stay soon. And yes.
yeah, I was excited. I think I came on your show during that time, and we just bonded so well with all the ladies that came together for that book opportunity, thanks to Karen. And it was such an incredible experience. I mean, I even look back now on it with so many positive memories. And I even met Karen in person because she happened to be living in Norfolk, and I was living in Norfolk at the time. And it was just such a positive experience and such a wonderful way to launch my podcast. And so I will always be forever grateful to yourself and Karen and the rest of the team that was my introduction into the world of podcasting. But today we're going to be talking about you, and we're going to be talking about psychological safety. We're going to be talking about workplace environments. We're going to be talking about whether or not inclusivity is woke or weak, or if someone's getting an unfair advantage. What really is DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion? And so, Dr. Zakiya, you are an author, international speaker, independent consultant, and you help businesses, colleges, and universities and communities design programs that address mental health, diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, in addition to social justice issues. And your opinion has been sought after by the media, federal government, United States military, and professional organizations. And you're well known for initiative programs which address issues of mental health, overcoming adversity, bias, inclusive leadership, intersectionality, as I said, psychological safety, and bystander intervention. So, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Teresa, for having me. And I just want to add to what you were talking about, the trajectory of us knowing us each other many years. I have been your cheerleader, and you have inspired me through your podcast, tackling the challenging, uncomfortable conversations. And I think you're doing an amazing job. And I just want to say kudos.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm so passionate about this work. I believe in it. I think it's the future of communications. And I think that the more that I see people doing this, especially the people that are coming in behind me in the public affairs community who have already embraced social media, have embraced podcasting, I think it's only a matter of time before my community will be communicating this way. And this will be the new normal to get messages out there and to have these kind of in-depth conversations. So first off, I always like to start with, where were you born and raised, and how did you start your journey, your professional workplace journey?
Okay, so that's always an interesting question when you ask a military kid where you're from, because I'm really from everywhere. My dad served in the United States Army, and we grew up mostly, my brother and I, overseas with my parents. And it wasn't until ninth grade that we moved back to the States, and we moved to Virginia, Tidewater. Actually, he retired at the now brat closed Fort Monroe. So that was a long time ago. But Virginia, I guess you would say, would be home, because that's where I went to high school, went to college, and a great bit of my professional career was in Northern Virginia, outside DC. So my professional career, my bachelor's is in social psychology. So I thought I was going to go to grad school and I was going to be a clinician and help people with their mental health That is not what happened. My first position, I was a substance abuse counselor for an organization in Fairfax, Virginia, with women who were addicted to drugs, and they lived in a residential setting and had their children there with them. I was very passionate, driven, fresh out of college, think you have all these bright ideas. And we had a client who was really struggling. And I started to take note of that, tell the clinician staff, and they're just, oh, she'll be okay. Well, went home one weekend, came back and find out that she decided not to be a part of life anymore. And that was extremely challenging for me. And I want to say a defining moment in my career, because I began to see that it was affecting my mental health, losing a client in that fashion. And so maybe about a month later, I began to vigorously apply for other jobs. My parents, who were then working for the federal government, recommended I do that. I did. I obtained a position in the EEO, Equal Opportunity Office for DOD agency, and started to learn more about EEO. And at that time, it wasn't EEO and diversity, it was just simply EEO. So processing informal complaints, training, mediation, things of that nature. And I began to really have a passion for it and wanted to know more about it. And as I advanced in my career, my mentor, one of my many mentors, told me that she started in EEO too. And she recommended I have a well-rounded career by working in EEO, human capital. And then later I decided to also diversity, equity, and inclusion at that time. And so those have been consistent in my federal career, whether I've been a federal employee or as a contractor, which I eventually left the government in 2015. I've been supporting in various capacities, and still, to me, the cornerstone of all of it is leadership, how we communicate, interpersonal skills. That's what I feel that I actually do is help people develop those skills.
So, was diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, and now accessibility, that wasn't what it was originally called in workforces 15, 20 years ago. It used to just been EEO. Is that what it was?
It was
Equal
E.
opportunity.
It was yes. It was EEO, and specifically for DoD Army, we had EEO offices, and then they became a diversity and inclusion office out of the Pentagon, which did mostly more policy work. And I did eventually have the privilege to work in that office, but they were more policy, and they kept it very much separate from EEO.
Mhm.
I'm finding now not just the federal government, but private sector are housing them more together because they understand that there's an intersection between um, federal mandates and also policy, internal policies. So yeah,
Mhm.
back then, 20 years ago, it was not from my recollection together, but now it is.
So, give me some examples. There are a lot of people that really don't understand diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. I can tell you when I was at PACOM, Pacific Command, or it might have been even Pacific Fleet before then. This is a long time ago, 2008, 2009. I was on a diversity committee. And so we would plan events. I've been on a couple diversity committees actually. Then I went on a ship, Amphibious Squadron 1 on USS Boxer, and I was also part of the diversity committee. And we would plan events that would really just celebrate different cultural heritage. We would have different themed months. But I don't think a lot of people really understand what DEI brings to the table in terms of organizations, whether it be the federal government, whether it be corporate America. So, can you tell us a little bit about what a DEI office brings to an organization or
It brings
DEIA?
That's very good question. What it brings to an office, an organization, is actually the cornerstone for which we are helping execute a strategic plan and a mission of an organization. How so? By honing in on those interpersonal skills that I talked about, those leadership skills. And I too, I think 2010, as I was a special emphasis program manager, for an agency, and we did a lot of commemorative events. And being DOD, you know, Diomi, every single course they had at Diomi in Cocoa Beach, Florida, Patrick Air Force Base, I have taken. And so it talks to you about having successful events, but also succession planning. That also DEIA practitioners have a seat at the table, because we're looking at things from a different lens. It's not trying to take away anyone's privileges or rights. It's trying to make sure even marginalized, unrepresented groups have a voice at the table, because oftentimes they do not.
Mhm. And I think that there needs to be maybe a separate office that is unbiased and that is separate from the dominant coalition that can take these concerns into consideration before they become a complaint. Is
That's
that
what
also
that's it in a nutshell. That is what we do. We're proactive. That is
right?
the point of it. Oh, thank you. My brain, it's been a busy week. We're being proactive so that we don't go to the informal and definitely not the formal stage of a complaint. Don't have to settle a settlement
Mhm.
because a manager did XYZ. If we're focusing on a regular basis on these interpersonal skills, having exercises, having learning experiences that are interactive, where also the participants educate, because we don't know it all. We
Mhm.
learn from
Sure.
things that you've gone through, and those are the most excellent examples. We do see, and we have seen a trend of lower EO complaints.
Interesting. Well, you know what? I will say my last command, and everyone complained and moaned about doing it, and there were a lot of people that didn't think it was necessary, but I found it to be such a positive experience, and that was when we were mandated to do extremism training all
Mm.
across DoD. And there's a lot of people that can argue whether or not we have this horrible extremism problem, or we do or we don't. But just the very exercise of talking about these issues and talking about discrimination, talking about if people are marginalized. It I mean, we had these small group discussions, I'll never forget it, after all the speakers came in. I had someone come in from NCIS, I had somebody come in from the Norfolk Police Department who works in hate crimes. I mean, I got really into it because I just thought, well, you're gonna put me in charge of this. I'm gonna find speakers that know something about these issues. But then in our small groups, we would ask questions, have you ever been discriminated against? And if so, why? What was the backstory on that? And some of the shares in the small group settings were really insightful. People have felt discriminated against for so many reasons. I mean, even white men, black people, people of different religions. I mean, it can go in so many different directions, and I don't think a lot of people account for that.
I agree with you 100%. And everybody's voice, in my opinion, is very valid on the topic, and not even just discriminated against. Sometimes it doesn't meet what we say in the legal terms to the level of, that's what they would say in EEO. It doesn't meet to the level of discrimination on the basis of race and age. However, you may see a situation that might not fall into the EEO realm because it doesn't reach to that level, but it still could be a micro assault. It could be a micro invalidation. So these microaggressions that happen on a regular basis, people need to talk about. So when you're able to talk about it, you can heal through some of the, what I like to call, work trauma that takes place, and also educate someone else that when you said, well, you speak very well and very articulate to be a blank person, you could fill in the blank, that's offensive. It's meant to be a compliment. We have to think about intent versus impact, but how the other person perceived it may have made them feel bad, shame, a lot of other emotions. So when we're looking at it from a holistic standpoint, we have to look at the intent, the impact, and the impact is what we're focusing on. And what are some of those behaviors that would add to not feeling that way? What are inclusive behaviors, and what are some of the maybe toxic behaviors that actually harm the individual and therefore also harms the vision and then the agency as a whole?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of organizations where they don't foster transparent and open communications. So problems are swept under the rug because people don't feel safe going to their supervisor or going to somebody within the room. I can tell you, even in my own organization, we do foster a culture of transparency and safety, because if we have a problem with somebody, we all just kind of talk about it, and we hash it out, even if it's dirty and even if it's uncomfortable. And it has been. I mean, even today, I had probably what I would consider an uncomfortable conversation that lasted all of about 5 minutes. And someone came in and tried to close the door between me and this person. And then I was like, that was my reminder, like, okay, let's stop getting so emotional about this issue and let's calm down, because now all these people are hearing what we're talking about. And but that's the culture of communications and transparency that I have in my current working environment, which makes me feel safe. And I've never really had that. And it's so refreshing. And it makes such a difference when people feel safe being emotional. And I don't think that there's a lot of workplaces that promote that. And I wonder what would happen if we promoted people's ability to sometimes be upset. It's okay to be upset.
It is not a bad thing to be upset and to feel safe, to be able to be vulnerable, uh, to be able to say, "Oh, I made a mistake," and not fear the repercussions that the gamut is going to come down on them. People would be more apt to not maybe try to hide their hand when they do something that's incorrect. Uh, I can tell you an example in my life that's not work related. It's the organization that I'm a part of, and I pointed out some inconsistencies and gaps, let's just say, to leadership, and they just wanted to, like, okay, next, like they did not want to address the issue. And I can tell you the issue later snowballed, not from me, but from several other things. And that's what's going to happen in any organization, whether we're talking about the workforce or any other topic. If you ignore when someone is coming to you, which might have been very challenging for the person to come on the first place, let's acknowledge that, but then not to address the issue or issues, it's just going to get worse. So transparency, being able to feel safe, open to make mistakes, are all keys to having an effective, because you might have an organization, obviously, but is it going to be effective? Is it going to be impactful? Are people going to stay by choice, and want to be there actually?
Right. And feel uh, personally invested in making the mission happen. You only build that by empowering a team that knows they can come to you or come to each other when they're having an issue. If you don't have a team that feels that they can do that, then problems are not going to be resolved, because let's face it, work can get very stressful. And we all, I think, feel the pressure of having, and I know I do, having too many tasks and too many things on our plate. So we're constantly having to prioritize who we serve. And it can get controversial who we serve and who we have to lower the level of services for to meet all the missions that are being asked of us. And that will inherently cause stress, and that will inherently cause friction between individuals. So that is why you have to have a safe working environment and a place to air and deconflict issues. Now, what is your advice to people who, and used to be very guilty of this, and I had to really work on it. If you were brought up in a home where people didn't talk about problems and things were not resolved, you don't naturally know how to do that. And I'm sure in your role as a DEI advisor, you had to confront leaders who wanted to hide problems and didn't want to face things because they came from a culture where people didn't talk about those things. How did you mitigate that?
Actually, in one of my trainings, I talk about how to respond to microaggressions. And there are three ways. You can be very passive, you can be very assertive, that's what we want, or very aggressive. So it sounds like somebody who might be grew up in a home where, well, we keep that what inside the home or
Yeah,
inside our
what's in the
office,
family, what stays
in
in
the
the
family, all
family.
of that. They might
Mhm.
be more passive when trying to resolve conflict. And I would assert to them, let's practice on some exercise on how to be more assertive. There are also lots of trainings that you can take. And there's also just podcasts that you can watch that have more detailed tips, but work on with your friends, your family members. It could be simple as where you guys are going to go to your next girls trip. And maybe you don't like going to water trips, but that's what the majority has been wanting. And you're just silent, like, okay, we're going to go there. Use your voice and say, we've gone to a number of water trips. It's my recommendation we do X, Y, and Z. So practice in your comfort zone is what I would recommend.
That's great
People that
advice.
you feel safe with, and then start and branching all out to your colleague, and then not just your colleague, then your whoever you report to, your supervisor, until it begins to exercise that muscle of being more assertive in your communication style.
Mhm. And I think that in this day and age, our next generation, they expect this. They are not going to be motivated by discipline or by this very coercive leadership style that I think, as I was coming up through the ranks, was still tolerated to a certain degree.
They're
But
not.
this new culture, they have so many options. They are celebrated in ways that we were not. Like, we were expected to only work a certain way. Now people can work from home. They have a lot more flexibility and they have a lot more options. And I do believe that the federal government needs to embrace a different way of getting things done.
I agree with you 100%. I'm Gen X, so um, interacting with this new generation of workers, whether you're in the federal government, private sector, it's different. It sometimes could be a little challenging, I could say. But I think you have to figure out what drives the individual. We still have to focus on not just necessarily the generation, but that individual. Maybe it could be time off. I know, because like you read my bio, I come from a military background. So my other half, he's a senior leadership in the Army. And so I and his father was just like mine. I remember his father telling a story about when he was deployed and someone did something really crazy. And um before going to Article 15, I think the punishments or the corrective action was either money or time or something. And you have to know the individual, which one would hurt them the most, because you want it to kind of sting a little bit so they
Mhm.
won't do the behavior again. So the same will come into play in the work that I do in private sector, is trying to figure out the individual, what will motivate them instead of punitive. Let's talk about what would motivate them to do the job. Maybe it is getting a stretch assignment. Maybe it's money. Maybe it is a title. Maybe it's better office space. But whatever that is, you have to have a conversation with that individual, and so that they can feel comfortable to share their career aspirations, because you're helping them on a journey. Remember, you're
Mhm.
just going to be a little chapter in their book that they're going to talk about to other people later. One of my professors in graduate school told me that. And it's so true. And you want to be the one that says, oh, I remember working with Colonel Teresa, and she was the bomb. She motivated me. She's the one who encouraged me to go back to school. You want to be that
You
person.
do
You
wanna
don't
be
want to be
that
the person in
person.
the story that person had me in therapy, crying at my desk. You don't want to be that person.
No, you don't.
So be the other person, be the better person, be the supervisor in the college that you want to
Ugh,
be, or
I
wish you
love
had.
what you just said. That's so true. Be the what did you say? Be the chapter in the book of the person later on that they write about and that they are
Yes.
inspired by. And
Mhm.
how do you as a leader become that person? I love that. It's so true. And as a leader myself in a position that I'm very honored to have, I strive to do that each and every day. And I was very fortunate. I had a very challenging leadership position as a carrier public affairs officer, and I made a lot of mistakes, and I was not as emotionally stable as I am today. And so 3 years later, to come back and to lead a team again has been such a restorative experience for me. And I'm not perfect. I still make mistakes. I still freak out and get stressed. But I can tell you, I feel so much more confident in my leadership abilities because I was given that chance to take those lessons learned and to do things a little bit differently and to be as involved. And I'm a lot more involved these days too. With That's another thing about leadership, I think, is now we're really just kind of pivoting to leadership, is that I think as leaders, we have to be involved.
Mhm.
I've worked for many leaders that were not, and were very distant from the doing of leadership. And I have found that that is not successful and does not uh, foster trust. Would you agree with that?
I would agree 100% with that. In order to lead effectively, the people have to trust you. How do they trust you? By getting to know you, by also knowing that if there's a deliverable due Monday morning, that you're going to roll your sleeves up and be in there with them Friday in the office on Saturday, making sure it's done, not just firing out orders for them to do, but you're going to be there right there with them, leading them, showing the proper way. So when an employee sees that, oh wow, this supervisor is just invested in this as I am, they're willing to do more. I know that you've been in a position where sometimes you're like, oh my goodness, this is not right, although it's on someone else's desk, but you want your supervisor to look good, you want your team to look good, so you jump in there and say, hey, how can I help, and I'm here. And you do that because of the respect and the relationship that you have with that superior, and that they have actually shown you that they're invested in you as well. So when you do that, it has a lot of um, effects on how you lead. Leadership, people want to be in a leadership position all the time, and a lot of them don't know how. They don't have
No.
the skill set, they don't have the character, they don't have the tools.
So
And
true.
so if that is the case, I would implore you, if you're watching this, is to take the time to do some professional development.
Hmm.
And listening to a podcast like this, and go back and look at some of her other ones, that is professional development in my book, because you're learning for someone who's already done something. I don't know what this something may be, which one you're looking at, but they're telling you how they navigated and some of the challenges and roadblocks that they have. How that's going to help you is in case you incur something very similar, you can say, oh, someone so said they did blah, 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 and maybe you can try it for yourself.
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons I started the show, was because I wanted to bring on people who have experienced hard things, have done hard things, and could share their stories and share their struggles in the hopes that others could listen to this and say, okay, it's a little bit easier for me because I can take what they did and the ways in which they messed up or the ways in which they succeeded, and I can model my growth and my development from what it is they are doing. And I think that is so important, because people all the time think that they're the first people to have ever had this struggle. And we're all human and we're all trying to figure out life together. And I think the more that we understand that and realize that we're in it together and we have each other's backs, the happier we will be and the better teams we will build. So, what is your advice for somebody who is struggling in an organization where they aren't feeling included? They aren't feeling that they're being celebrated for their abilities or for their talents and their skills. What advice would you have for them?
For number one, I would recommend to any practitioner is each week take to have a list of things that your accomplishment. That doesn't just help you; it helps you when it's time for performance evaluation. But also, you have to start being our own champion. Maybe schedule one-on-ones with your supervisor so they can be aware of your achievements for that week and also any obstacles that you have. That also will start to build that muscle of I'm making an impact. Hopefully, if you have a good leader, they're celebrating you, acknowledging you in team meetings. Also, I would recommend mentoring. Find someone who has maybe not just a similar background than you, but a lot of my mentors don't look like me and have a totally different background than myself. And I have found that that has caused me to actually stretch. The reason why I left the federal government in 2015 was because I was talking to a mentor who worked for a nonprofit, and I was explaining some of the challenges. And she's like, Zakiya, your mind is more like a consultant. Have you ever considered that? And at that time, I had not. So we talked a little more in depth. I applied that weekend. And within a month, I had a job. They flew me out to the DC area. I had an interview, and I was relocating because of the advice of a mentor who didn't even work really in my realm, but in private sector. We met at a conference. So conversations with people, learning from other people, mentors, and then also you need a good sponsor. And people are like, what is sponsor? It differs from a mentor. A sponsor is someone who, when you're not in the room, they're your cheerleader. They're saying, you know what, who might be a good job for that or
Mhm.
good for that is so and so. Or they might throw your name in a hat for an opportunity, another type of opportunity, or just mention your name and say, you know, who's doing a very good job, and I'm really proud. Bob is doing an excellent job, and I don't know if you know Bob, but maybe you two should connect and have a virtual coffee, or really sit down for a coffee or a tea. You need a champion, and champions are is someone who's been able to see your work performance. And the question you ask someone who might feel like they're not getting recognized, if you start to have more conversations, although I know there are introverts on the line, but it can start with a simple email. Maybe you saw someone give a presentation, you send them a message either at work, a DM, or on LinkedIn, and you start to establish that relationship. One thing I will say is whether it's a mentor or a sponsor, you have to nurture it just like a plant. You have to water it. You sometimes have to give it food. Don't be reaching out to anyone just because you need something, because I can tell you they will look at your message like they got to be crazy. So nurture your relationships just like we have done. We've stayed
Mhm.
in contact. I've even sought advice from you.
Mhm.
In our team. So continue to grow your relationships, and that would also start to build your level of exposure and confidence.
And be involved. I think that with your organization. So one of the things that, I'm not the most extroverted person. I don't really consider myself the life of the party or the center of attention in a room, but I force myself to go to the socials and things like that because I realize that when I go to, and they're really amazing at NATO, for an example, because they're these international nights that we do where we'll have like German night or we'll have French night, and they're absolutely just totally incredible. When you go, you dress up and you have a nice beautiful dinner, and then there's like a live band, and it's something I've just never experienced before. So I can't complain about NATO international nights. They're absolutely amazing. But I will say that I sort of in a way have to force myself to go and be in the room, because in those big rooms with all these people that speak all these different languages and people that I might not work with all the time, even though I'm the PAO and most people know who public affairs is, they're still a little bit daunting to me because I'm much more intimate and close on one or 1 to 3, something like that. But I would say that is a perfect opportunity, like you said, Zakiya, to go when you don't need anything and to
Mhm.
have those rapport building conversations that will never happen if you don't come to the table when you don't need anything.
Absolutely, 100% concur. And I'm a little jealous of your beautiful events that you're attending over there at NATO. They sound wonderful.
They are pretty cool, actually.
But I will say, going back to when I worked for Deloitte, we used to have a lot of events to go to. And at that time, due to a lot of circumstances, my anxiety was very high. And sometimes I did not want to go to the meeting, the events after work. But I would force myself to go, and I would literally have a conversation with myself. I didn't answer back, y'all, but
I do the
I
same
would
thing.
say, you can't go, stay for an hour,
Yes,
have
I
a face
do.
be seen, mingle, and then you can leave. Zakiya, if you're feeling uncomfortable, go to your car, get yourself together, have a little bowl of water, go back in there. I had to literally do that
I
to
do the same
myself.
thing.
Yes. And so those one conversations you have with yourself, positive affirmations, that's key. That's how I made it through. I'm telling you, because it was just like the military. It's not mandatory that you go, but it's like if you didn't go. So like I had to go.
Yeah,
And I
right.
pushed myself through it.
Yep, and I always joke with people that I have fun of those things in spite of myself, because
Yes.
I find that I go and then I get to know people on a whole nother level that I would have never done. And of course, you start those things off like you're holding your drink and you got your plate and it's all kind of awkward and you're talking about shallow, stupid shit that no one, that neither one of us really care about that much. But gradually, just very slowly, you start to sort of transition sometimes into a joke or a funny conversation. And those moments, I think, are priceless. You might not think about it in the moment that it's so special. But then when you look back on it, you're like, wow, I did that. And especially for me in this strange multicultural world that I find myself in, it has really improved my confidence that I could go into a room and interact with somebody from any nation and find, as long as they speak English or they speak enough English, I can find some kind of common ground. And that's an amazing feeling. And
Wait, can
so
I pause you right there? That I think that also we need to highlight finding the common ground. That also is our role in life as we navigate in any of these positions, is to find where is our commonality. Instead of focusing on what's different, what do we have in common? And let's build from there.
that's so true. So true. And there is common ground with everyone, even people that you may not trust all the time or people that you think might do little shady things a little bit. That's life. And you're going, I feel I'm going to have to interact with people that sometimes I would never interact with in my personal life, but in my professional life, these are my colleagues. And it is our job, as you say, Zakiya, to find that common ground and to nurture those areas where we have that common ground. Do you think that every organization should have some sort of a DEI office? Or like in my office at NATO, we have a gender advisor, but I don't think we don't have DEI. And also please explain when accessibility. Okay, so two questions. Number one, do should they have this office, and how would an organization get started? And then we'll transition to the accessibility question.
Okay, so yes, I believe all offices should have it. I did work for an organization that had the gender. What did you call the
Advisor,
role?
gender
Yes,
advisor.
a gender advisor. And again, for them, it was for overseas. It wasn't for here in the continental US.
Mhm. Yeah, mine's
So that's interesting. I think it
mhm,
has to do with cultures and
mhm.
how women are treated in various cultures. So I can understand why that position is there. But I do still believe that there should be a DEIA advisor of some sort there. And I would also say that it should be someone who has the skills, not simply because they're a minority put in that position. Because after the knee on the neck of George Floyd, everybody wanted to be a DIA practitioner, and a lot of people were put in the position but didn't have the background knowledge and the foundation or the skill set or the training to do the job. Just because you're brown, just because you're a woman, does not make you qualified to be a
Yes.
DI specialist, advisor, program manager, any of the above.
Mhm.
Sorry, I had to get that out.
No, I agree, and I think that it's a matter of funding and it's a matter of resourcing this type of role, and I love what you said about having that DEI advisor to not only run training and run maybe a crucial conversation workshop or something
Mhm.
along those lines, but to be that first line of defense where people feel safe coming to you as the DEI advisor instead of to their supervisor if they're struggling with an issue or they just want to talk to somebody before it raises to the level of a complaint. I think that is an amazing idea. Like I wonder, looking back on my previous commands, if there was a DEI advisor that walked around and made themselves known and available and open, if I would have felt safe going to them before, if it was something that I didn't feel comfortable talking to my supervisor about, and just going there in an advisor role to say, hey, I'd like to pick your brain about this and this and this. I mean, I think, gosh, I mean, statistically speaking, it would be interesting to know how much that might reduce the level of workplace complaints and negotiations, and to pay off somebody
Mhm.
so that they don't have a lawsuit or to settle. It would be interesting to know that's like a step that a company could take before
It
it gets
really
to that
is a
level.
step. I know in the EO office they have ADR, alternative dispute resolution, but this is even, in my opinion, how I've seen it work, even more helpful than that, because that you're sitting at a table with a mediator, and then you have a supervisor and then an employee, and it's so formal. But like you said, in an informal level, just going on ever to talk, be able to talk to someone who has the training and skills to know, okay, well, is this really a complaint, or do we need to do some training in your division? Is there a leadership issue? Is there an ethical issue going on here? Who has the training to discern between all those different things and be able to provide the employee the information on how to navigate it, and not just simply sending them to EAP, Employee Assistance Program, but actually giving them some tangible things that they can utilize to help through that situation. And I just want to say real quick, I'm not throwing shade on any practitioner that is from a marginalized community who are DIA professionals, but I am saying that you should be able to have your resume should reflect that you have the skill set to actually handle the position, is what I was trying to articulate. So I didn't want it to come
No,
across rude or anything, but that is just my firm belief, because I have seen over the last almost 4 years some people who have no idea about they are in the roles, but they don't have the background or the capacity to actually handle some of these issues, and it does the not just it does the organization a disservice.
absolutely. The person should be qualified on how to handle these complex issues. And the fact that they're, like you said, they're black or they're a whatever, they're a certain cultural affinity or a religion shouldn't be the reason why they're chosen. No different than the fairness issue that thought that I wanted to address at the beginning of the call, that I think I can transition to, and then we'll get to the accessibility question that I still want to ask. But what is it that you say to the naysayers who say that we've gone woke, or that we have given people a unfair advantage in the name of diversity? There's a lot of people who I know on my LinkedIn who talk about these issues and say that we have now embraced this DEI concept, especially the military, so stridently to the point where we're allowing people to not meet the standards. What do you have to say to that?
I say I would offer for them to understand the difference between equity and equality. I know when we're in the green room, we had a little bit of a conversation about that. And I think that's really paramount to understand that equality is everybody gets the same. We're all the same. Yay. No, we want to rise to the level where we're at equity, where depending on our life circumstances, it could be religious, it could be disability, that we're giving someone equal access to the opportunity. And that goes into the conversation a little bit. That's a hot trending topic, because with the return to work, people want people to come back in the office, stop this remote work, stop this telework. Well, sometimes I can understand while leaders will be like, we need to have everyone back here, but I think you still should look at the individual and see what their needs are. I can tell you, I've been teleworking since 2008 for a lot of my jobs. And I can tell you that I've left positions that were not amenable or made my life very challenging because of some of the disabilities that I have documented, have letters and all of that. I actually produce and have been producing much better when I'm in a quiet environment, don't have the water cooler conversations, don't have someone coming over to talk, hey, you want to go to lunch, you want to do all that stuff is very distracting for me. And I produce the best work when I'm working in a quiet or location away. Not just that, I now have acquired disability, a physical disability. So sometimes I have limitations with walking. With that being said, it's on an individual basis. So someone else may not have all those things. And you have to put in some metrics there to be able within your organization to say, well, what is the bar that we're going to set for who gets to do this and who doesn't? What are the extenuating circumstances? Of course, we know Title VII, and we know the Rehab Act for Individuals with Disability of 1973, as amended, talks about individuals with disabilities. And of course, that's covered. But there's some other things that goes on in people's lives that may not fall underneath Title VII. And so that's where we have to put on our thinking cap to see how can we best serve the employee while still meeting the mission of our organization. So I hope I answered your question.
You did. You did.
Okay.
No, and it's really tough. I mean, as a leader myself with employees who telework, it's hard when your front office and your higher level leadership does not. And they're okay with the fact that you, as the boss or the supervisor, the line manager, uh, allows your employees to do it. But if they're not physically in the office and you have what I call short or no notice tasking, then unfortunately, the people who remain in the office are going to get stuck with those tasks because it's just too tough, especially if it's on a short fuse deadline, to try to give it to somebody that's already at home. You can, but it's just more difficult. And so it becomes much more challenging, especially too when most of the higher level leadership is tied up in meetings all day. And that is a whole nother issue that I could talk about for hours, is why do we do so many meetings in large organizations? But
A
that
meeting about a meeting. We're gonna have a meeting about the meeting we're gonna have next week.
that's what we have. We have literally we have working group meetings to lead up to the actual meeting. It
Yes.
is absolutely is it's incredibly crazy. And I'm not just talking about my own organization. I'm talking about just large bureaucracies as a whole.
Yes.
We just start
Mhm.
thinking about how to slash meetings. But again, that's one reason why a lot of my senior level leadership can't work from home, is because they just have too many darn meetings that they have to go to. But beyond that, I think that what you have to do is, while you understand that everybody has certain disabilities and they have certain accommodation needs, you still have to be, as a leader, you have to be fair. And so, what I have found is that you have to get creative. So, while some people might need, like you said, time off, others might need work from home, others might need more of a prestigious title. They need to be in charge of something, they need to have that role and that responsibility. That's what's going to motivate them. So, it comes down to, like what you said, you have to know how to motivate each person. And sometimes when you are giving such generous work from home, as I do, then you have to find other incentives and other ways to motivate people to do the mission, and to rally people around your cause, or the cause of the organization rather. And so I have found that is the only way to execute work from home. But I haven't seen a lot of conversations about that, because I was never uh, somebody who didn't like work from home or didn't understand it until I became a supervisor of people who do it. And then at first I resisted it and didn't want it. And now I I I understand why we do it. I understand that it's harder, but I also understand that it gives people, like you said, the quiet time they need to get the deep dive work done. And honestly, I think that's one of the biggest parts that is good about it. And oh, by the way, you do have a little message on here.
Hey, Zakiya.
Hi,
We went to
Dr. G.
college together. Her name is
Oh,
Zakiya
that's
as well.
awesome.
Hey, namesake. She works in in the academia.
Oh, that's awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. All right. So I wanted to transition then to most people have heard of DEI, but what is the accessibility, and is DEIA now a new corporate term? Like, has that been formalized?
I would say in DOD, federal government, it's been formalized. We have executive orders for diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility. So that's the short answer. Federal wise, yes. Corporate wise, no. Some people leave the A off. Some people have belonging there. So it's a lot of variations. It's not very standard in corporate America. And what is the A for? It's first accessibility, access to the information. When you think about technology, that means is your systems, is your web pages 508 compliant, and even down to the granular level as colors in your PowerPoint. There's some people
Hmm.
who may be low vision, or some people who have color blindness, and they can't see certain colors. So you have to make sure all of that people have access to the information and systems. Whether they have to use assistive technology. An example of that would be like JAWS if you're visually impaired. And we don't want to say that, okay, Teams, I can't access it because Teams is incompatible with that. We want to make sure everything that we have, people have access. And then we want to talk about on a structural level, you don't want to have a meeting, even if it's a social meeting after work, at somewhere where there's steps to get up, but there's no flat surface or no elevator to get in. Why? Because you have to think about, someone may have a access problem. They could be a wheelchair user, or it could be some other limitation that prevents them from being able to climb the stairs. So that's after work in the building. You just want to make sure that people have access to the
Mm.
opportunities that you are presenting. And so that's why we added the A. We as a community added the A, was added because we want accessibility.
Yeah, that's something I've never really thought about in terms of colors on a PowerPoint, people not understanding that. Um, one of the ones that I thought was interesting at my last job is we started seeing service dogs at work. And I thought that was really interesting. And that could also be the future in terms of accessibility is allowing people who do need a service dog for a disability the ability to bring their service dog to work. And I do believe that some federal buildings and organizations are now allowing that. So that's a new development as well. So I think that in time we'll begin as we always do. I do believe that humans evolve, and as we evolve, we start to understand these issues a lot more. Is there anything else that we haven't covered down on that you want to also address when it comes to this issue with DEI?
I think we often talk about whether it's discrimination or microaggressions being on the receiving end, like someone did this to me, or I observed this and it's affecting me this way. But we also, I would assert, have to pay attention to when we are actually the perpetrator, and how do we recognize it ourselves. Of course, that will come with higher level of emotional intelligence, or if someone brings it to you, focus on how you respond to that. And I think you, me, everyone should make sure that we recognize and make the person feel seen and heard. Don't be dismissive, and do some exercises around how we respond to that. Even if it's not even a microaggression, maybe it's something that's unpleasant, some information, feedback. As leaders, we know that that happens on a regular basis as part of being in a leadership capacity, but maybe work on how we respond to individuals, because it certainly can impact someone's health, well-being, in their career. Uh, Again, I talked about work trauma. That could be traumatizing if you blow up and just start cursing someone out, or you're very dismissive. So focus on how we come across to each other. That is the only thing that I would add with. And thank you for having me for Women's History Month. I believe women, we are dynamic, we are change agents, and we're helping shape the workforce, the future workforce, and as we move the needle by the strides that we're taking. We have to continue to shadow glass ceilings, no matter how high they are. If they seem like they're unbreakable, we can take a baton and break those bad boys. We can do it. I believe we can. It starts with having candid conversations like this that may not always be comfortable, but we still have to have them. And again, my hat off to you, Teresa, for not just the leadership you do on your podcast, your posts on Facebook. Some of them are so raw and so real, and I can relate even about family, some family things that you've posted. So I will say, keep showing up, keep speaking up for the little guy or the person who feel their voice will not be heard.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. That's such an honor to hear that from you too, because like I said, when I started this journey 3 years ago, I had somewhat of a voice on Facebook and a little bit of a LinkedIn following, but it was never nowhere near the size that it is now. And I have just been in such awe of you and Karen and all the ladies that we were co-authors with. That was really my start into all of this. And one of the things that really stuck out with me is that the majority of you were African American. And I remember thinking to myself, you guys just had no shame about being proud of who you are, what you stand for, and what you do. And I think sometimes, and I don't know if it's a cultural thing or a white woman thing, we just think that we can't be proud, and we think we can't stand up and really promote ourselves in a way that celebrates each other. And I remember being in that community, and it really struck me how well you guys celebrated one another, and it really made an impact on me, and really helped me and propelled me forward to where I am today.
Oh,
So
can
I
I
want to thank
say
you.
something to that point? Thank you so much. But actually, in our culture, we're taught very girl, go sit down. It's bragging. Don't brag. So this is a learned skill. You're talking about an exceptional group of women who've done an enormous amount of learning, self work, to be able to do this, because we're taught the opposite in our culture. We're taught not to brag, not to talk about your accomplishments, and all of those different things. So Dr. Karen is amazing,
She's
and
a
she
wonderful
definitely sets the
woman.
bar on be proud and stand on what you stand on. And if no one else is going to celebrate you, celebrate yourself. But that
Yep.
is a very learned skill.
Yeah. Well, I definitely picked that up from being in this experience with all of you. And so, thank you so much. I'll
Thank
meet you
you.
backstage to say goodbye. I'll close out here and go full screen for a moment. But I do want to say thank you for having this conversation with me. Oh, before we close out, where can people find you?
I am Dr. Zakiya on most things, but I will drop my digital business card in the comment section a little while later. I will drop and you can find me on all platforms, find some of my podcasts and things of that nature. So I'll drop it in the chat.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Thank you. I've learned so much, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Next weekend, next week, I'm very excited. I have another amazing guest. I'll leave it as a surprise because I got to still work on the promo materials and get everything out. But wonderful conversation about DEI and A. And I hope that you learned a lot. I know that I did. Okay. Well, I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Enjoy the spring. The days are getting longer. Very excited about that. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And bye bye now.